Hi, I'm Owen Fitzpatrick, author of the book, The Charismatic Edge, and creator of the online Charisma Training Academy. And this particular video, I want to share with you one of the most important aspects of persuasion or influence that you could possibly learn. And that's the 6 principles of influence according to Robert Cialdini. Robert Cialdini is a phenomenal researcher who started to study back in the 60s and 70s, everything he could possibly study and everything he could possibly find out about the areas of influence and persuasion. And he broke all of it down to 6 important principles which are really important for you to be able to use and apply. Now, of course, there's more principles of persuasion than just these 6, but these 6 are very, very useful and very, very applicable to a lot of different scenarios, a lot of different situations. So I wanted to take one short video to be able to explain each of them very simply, quickly, and easily to you. So you can take these ideas and use them in your own life, in your own business, to transform the quality of both. The first principle of influence, according to Robert Cialdini, is the principle of reciprocation. Very simply, this says that whenever you give something to somebody, they're more likely to want to give back to you. Now, a lot of times this can be not just for something tangible that you give to people, like, for example, you give them a free magazine, but it can also be an intangible idea. For example, if you make a person feel really good, or if you give them the idea that they're getting a discount. Giving a discount doesn't actually exist. You don't give a discount. Instead, you sell something for a lower price. But by creating the idea that you're giving a discount, it makes the other person feel more likely that actually they're getting a really good deal and they want to buy more because they're getting a discount. So the importance of reciprocity, or the principle of reciprocation, is to ask yourself the question, how can you give something to the other person? Because by doing so, they're more likely to want to give back to you. It's also useful a lot of the time to be able to remind people that you're giving something to them. So, whenever you do deliver something to them and they say thank you, you say, it's great, I know you do the same for me if I ever needed it. By creating that idea of reciprocation, it makes the other person feel much more obliged to help you out when you need the help as well. Powerful tool. The second principle is the principle of commitment or consistency. Very simply, what this means is that as soon as you get a person to say yes to something small, they're more likely to say yes to something bigger later on. So if you can get a person to agree to some small terms, then the more that they've committed to that, the more they feel the need to be consistent with their prior decisions. This is because of a principle in psychology known as cognitive dissonance. People have a need to be in alignment with what they've previously decided to do. So what's really imperative is that you get them agreeing to something small, and the more that you do it, the more likely they are to want to be in identifying with and in alignment with whatever they've said before. Get someone to do something a little bit for you, get something to do something small for you, get someone to say a yes to something that's easy for them to do, and they're more likely to say yes to something big later on. So again, the question to ask on this front is, how can you get someone to say yes to something small? Because later on, it'll make it easier for you to get a bigger yes. The third principle is the principle of liking. What this simply means is that whenever you're more likable, you're more persuasive. So the more likable you are, the more you can make people feel good, the more people want to be around you, the more effective you are at influencing them. So asking yourself the question, how can you become more likable? How can you make people feel good? How can you make people be able to want to be around you more? The more that you can do that, the more not only will they want to be around you, but they'll also be more likely to be persuaded by you. So once again, the question very simply is, how can you be more likable to other people? The fourth principle is the principle of authority. What this simply means is that whenever you want to present an idea to someone, the more you can position yourself as having an air of authority, or you can position yourself in a position of authority, or you can use authority or someone else's authority and have the idea come from them, the more likely people will be to accept that message. The idea here is that authority is something that makes people be more convinced, because a lot of them assume, because it's coming from a person in authority, that it must be true, or it's probably true as a result. So again, ask yourself the question, how can you present your idea in the form of authority, either your authority or someone else's, borrowing authority or credibility from someone else. But by using authority, you're much more likely to get the idea accepted, and you're much more likely to get them to believe whatever it is that you're saying. The fifth principle is social proof. By social proof, I simply mean is that every single time that you present an idea to someone, people are more likely to believe you if other people agree. So if most people agree with an idea, then that idea is much more persuasive. Using social proof means potentially using testimonials or using case studies or using examples or using quotes or demonstrating and pointing to best-selling charts. By you being able to demonstrate that most people do it, it makes the person that's listening to you much more likely to believe, well, if most people do it, then it's probably something that's good or probably something that's valuable or probably something that's accurate or correct. So again, the question here to ask is, how can you present to another person the idea that most people do it or most people believe whatever it is that your idea is? So whatever your idea is, you're finding out how can you give examples of lots of people believing it? Because the more that you do, the more the person listening to you will believe, well, because everyone else says it, it must be so. The sixth principle of influence is the principle of scarcity. Simply speaking, what we talk about when we talk about scarcity is that the more scarce something is, the harder something is to get, the more we want it. You've all heard the expression, they're playing hard to get. And the reason people do play hard to get is that the harder they are to get, the more valuable they're perceived because the more scarce they are. So the critical thing to do is to ensure that when you're presenting your idea, when you're presenting your product or service, whatever you want to influence people to buy or to do, you're asking yourself the question, how can I make this seem more scarce, more unique, more valuable as a result? The more that you do that, the more likely people are to see it as valuable and believe it. So again, in summary, the 6 principles of influence as outlined by Cialdini and something that is really valuable for you to practice are as follows. Reciprocation, when you give to someone, they feel obliged to give back to you. Commitment or consistency, when you get a small yes, you're more likely to get a big yes later on because people want to be consistent with their earlier responses. Likeability, the more likable you are, the more likely people are to believe you. Authority, the more you present your idea with a position of authority, the more likely people are to believe you because they believe people in authority. Social proof, the more you're able to present the message in a way that everyone else seems to agree with it, the more likely people are to agree with it because if everyone else agrees with it, it must be so. And scarcity, the more that something's scarce or difficult to get, the more valuable people perceive it to be. I really hope that you can not only find this interesting, but also that you find it useful by applying Cialdini's 6 principles to whatever persuasive effort that you're engaging in. For now, I'm Owen Fitzpatrick. Thank you very much for watching.